Because you look like a new face.
Okay. Representing what interest?
I represent the board. Yeah, I think so.
We're back on the record, special meeting, March 31st, 2014, the West New York Parking Authority. The time is 9:37 a.m.
Let the record reflect that executive session closed at 9:30. During the executive session, personnel matters were discussed. Minutes will be produced. At this time, they will remain confidential. At such time that the need for confidentiality does not exist, they will be disclosed to the public.
Actually, do you mean that the session ended at 9:30?
Ended, yes.
The only thing, so we're going to discuss, I think we're going to move and discuss 66th Street. Do you want to invite the developer in?
Sure.
So you can hear?
Did you want to do public comments first?
I think after. I don't know. I mean, I presume most of the public comments are going to be directed towards the 66th
Right,
Street
so
development.
let's do it after.
Yeah. I think the public's been waiting to be heard, so let's hear it. What we're going to ask you guys to do is state your name, your address, and we're going to ask you to speak for 5 minutes. It's not a hard rule, but you know, we ask you not to abuse it, and to the extent that there are things that have been said before, please try to find something new to say.
Good morning.
Morning.
There's a chair here, there's a chair there, and there's a chair back there. Yeah, you can sit up here. We're here to talk about your deal. These people are here to listen. Okay. Do we have a sign-in sheet?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, we need a sign-in sheet. We got a lot of folks here.
You're fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got it? You want to get a sign-in sheet so we can keep order?
Do you guys want to start? This is agenda item under new business, number 5, discussion of contract to sale 66th Street parking lot, Park Avenue 5.
So, while Mr. Rivera gets a sign-in sheet, let's get the first person up and we'll start.
Yes, I have to go at 10.
Okay, so why don't you put your pocketbook down, put your umbrella down,
Anyway,
relax. Why don't you stand here, so we can hear you closest to the tape. And I'd like you to state your name, and your address, and you have 5 minutes.
Okay. Anyway, my name is Linda Kellerman, 6600 Boulevard East. And the reason why I'm here is comments about the proposed building at 66th Street and Park Avenue, where there's a parking lot existing. In March 2013, there was a planning board meeting to consider whether that area was in need of redevelopment. And I'm totally against them changing the parking lot there. At night and on weekends, the parking lot is packed. And if they get rid of the parking lot, even temporarily while Mr. Capadagli builds his property, the businesses around there are going to suffer because they need the people to park there and do business. People who want to visit people in the area, they're going to have a very hard time getting a parking spot. And it's very congested. The area is very congested as it is. I saw Mr. Capadagli, I saw your property at 60th and Park Avenue, the Meridian, the park, whatever it's called. It looks terrible. It doesn't fit in. And I'm totally against them touching the parking lot. If that plan is approved, and even if they grant him the air rights, where are people going to park for over a year while he builds the property? So I'm totally against it. They need the parking spaces for the public at 66th Street and Park Avenue. Thank you.
Would you just do me a favor, Ms. Kellerman?
Yes.
Would you please just sign the sheet so we can just have a record of you
He
attending?
signed for me.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Print, folks, thanks. So it's legible. Let me just put it in for the record on the minutes, so that everybody's recognized as having spoken if you wish to speak. Thank you.
Patrick Cullen, email address, Counselor?
I'd like you to spell your last name,
C-U-L-L-E-N,
and then you can just give your address.
72 67th Street. It's noted by me, and hopefully the board, that no one interrupted Ms. Kellerman when she spoke. It does say that each person is limited to his question of address to 5 minutes, so I expect to be held to that rather than be interrupted by any of the points I'm about to make. All right? Thank you. New Jersey Local Government Ethics Law, PL 1991, C29, which is also C40A:9-21-1, et sequence, talks about conflict of interest, and the members of this board are bound by that law. You can look it up if you need to. Okay, Mr. Armando Alvarez, did you buy a property at 6608 Lincoln Place that belonged to Mr. Acosta?
You don't have to respond, just let him, this is not an interview.
Oh, all right, thank you.
You have 5 minutes to make a
Yes,
statement.
all right, yes. So Mr. Alvarez acknowledged that he bought that. He also bought a property at 55 Grand Place from Mr. Acosta. Both were done on a short sale. Both have multiple violations. The zoning board just gave the blessing to okay the 5514 property that Mr. Alvarez voted. So therefore, it's definitely a conflict of interest to him to vote on the 66 Parking Street matter, as well as any action terminating Mr. Rivera. The conflict of interest with the parking lot is because his property value is going to increase if Capital Dodley builds that parking lot. Therefore, so is a conflict of interest. There is also a conflict of interest with Mr. Rodriguez, Henry Rodriguez, who is the son-in-law of Ruben Vargas, to vote on this board, because Ruben Vargas' wife, who had a suspicious 3-alarm house fire reported in the Jersey Journal of December 5th of 2012, that's right next to my family, that could have killed my family because of that suspicious house fire in nature, his property value will go up if that Capadogny property is built as well. So there's definite conflict of interest. There's only 4 zoning planning parking authority members present. Therefore, since Mr. Rodriguez and since Mr. Alvarez cannot vote on these matters, I suspect that you do not have a quorum here. You have to recuse yourself. Therefore, only 2 people can possibly vote to do the mayor's dirty work. Therefore, you have to recuse yourselves on these matters.
Your 5 minutes aren't up. Are you done?
Thank you. I appreciate your courtesy, Counselor. Let's see. Yes, I was at the planning board meeting that Ms. Kellerman referred to, and at that time the planning board was all set to vote for the Capadogny for the properties to be held in an area in need of redevelopment. But then Doug Borden of the Versailles had a smoking gun letter between the lawyers of the parking authority and the lawyer of the Capadogny that had the wink-wink, nod-nod agreement that if the planning board voted yes, that they would pull the trigger on the deal. The planning board voted no on that deal, all right? As she said, what's going to happen is if you, let's say Capadogny gets this proposal and they have the 77 spots in the lot, what will happen is there's nothing stopping the 200 or 300 or 400 people that have their assigned spots in there from parking on the street at nighttime. We won't be able to get a parking spot. Overlook Terrace, case in point. 2 years ago, there were 31 vehicles I counted with Overlook Terrace stickers parked at nighttime on the street. But there were 57 available spots in the 5 lots around Overlook Terrace. So I would be considerate of us here. Parking, parking, parking. It seems like there's an unhealthy relationship between the parking authority and Capadogny and especially Mr. Alvarez, since you were a member of the zoning board, approved Capadogny at Versailles, Le Meridia, even though it had to be brought to court and then it was shot down on court. You need to recuse yourself, and if that's the way it's done. But the law that I just quoted states that the state law says that you don't have any latitude. If there is a conflict of interest, direct or indirect, personal, financially, you must recuse yourself. And sir, Mr. Rodriguez, you have a personal conflict of interest because you are the son-in-law of Ruben Vargas, who is public official number 2 in the U.S. versus ROQUE and ROQUE, and Mr. Acosta, who you bought the two properties from, was public official number 1 in U.S. versus ROQUE and ROQUE. And he was the unnamed co-conspirator of that, sir. So, sir, you can definitely not vote, and I submit to you, Mr. Rodriguez, you cannot vote either. Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Who's next?
Daniel Alvarez, 4204 New York Avenue. Just have a few questions. First of all, was this property appraised?
You're making a statement, sir.
I'm asking a question.
Yeah, it's not, we're not answering.
You're not answering the question?
No.
Okay, so I'm assuming it wasn't appraised. Second question, which I guess I'm not going to get any answers for. Were there any other competing bids? Was this property advertised for sale? Or did you guys just accept the first offer that walked through the door?
It was publicly bidded for.
It was?
Yes, sir.
It was advertised in the paper?
Yes, sir. I can give you copies of that. We can give you copies of all that.
It's just to let them make their statements. Don't.
Okay, all right, so having said all that, that alleviates half of my concerns, since it was advertised. I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what you said, even though you want us to repeat what you said. There are conflicts of interest on this board.
Do you have any other conflicts of interest that you're aware of, other than the ones that were stated by Mr. Cullen?
No, just to reiterate, 6608 Lincoln Place, he owns that property.
Well, we're asking you not to reiterate. There are a number of people here, and, you know, so we'll just ask, if you don't have anything additional, we appreciate your conversation.
That's it.
Thank you.
No, I have questions that they're not gonna be responded to. My name's Anthony Amdefino,
Why don't you,
6600 Boulevard East.
Hold on.
Okay,
Come on up.
I'm up right here, this is good enough.
Go ahead.
All right, my name's Anthony Amdefino, 6600 Boulevard East. If you're not gonna respond to questions, this is moot, and I'm not gonna waste anybody's time here. I wanna know the same thing he asked, I'm not gonna repeat the questions. What's the value of this property assessed at? Who did the comp on it? But you're not gonna give answers, what's the point? We're just gonna sit here and blow wind?
Why don't you state the questions you have?
I
And when
did
the board,
state-
and
the
when
questions
the-
were
and
stated
when the
already.
board,
Not trying to
when the
argue
board
with you,
has
I'm
a
saying,
chance to
this
deliberate.
is just a statement, I'm not gonna waste anybody else's time here,
You're not wasting anyone's time. It's
but I'm not gonna get
beneficial
answers
for
that I
the-
want, sir.
It's beneficial that the public shows up to these meetings.
What was the comp on this property? What was the value of this property? When was the bid? Was it done publicly? In what papers was it done? I'm gonna get those answers later. Was this a reciprocal payback for the property on 66 that Boulevard East not being sold? Not going through in the zoning board? If the planning board denied this, yes, the planning board denied this back in March, when did you reiterate this to the planning board to do this sale? And when did this go in front of the planning board or any other board to get this sale done? What are the procedural requirements for the bidding? Was it an open bid? Was it a closed bid? Okay, so I have other questions, but like I said, I don't wanna waste anybody else's time, but I will get the paperwork from you later.
Sure.
I find it a little reprehensible that we can't get answers from anybody. And I also think that we should have been able to ask questions after they presented what they're gonna do there, because we're blind right now.
The commissioners may give you that opportunity.
Thank you.
My name is Carlos Betancourt, I reside at 6305 Jackson Street. And basically my statement is, certainly it's been covered, the whole gambit by everybody here. I expect there is no quorum based on a conflict of interest, okay? Furthermore, what I'm looking at here is the continuance of certain parties or the corruption thereof of the town and the properties they're involved in. I don't appreciate my town being sold off parcel by parcel for special interests. I've been an investigator for a long time also. I don't expect any kind of compensatory situation by the developer towards anybody on this board, now or in the future. Thank you very much.
Danny Perales, 556.
Just come around because the microphone, I just want to make sure we did everything. We don't have the benefit of the technology that you guys have.
Danny Perales, 556 59th Street. I've never really attended one of these meetings, so I've never seen any of your guys' faces. I know some people from around town. Just want to say that, you know, this property, I know the people, the board members do live in town, supposedly, so they know the problems that we have here. And one of the big problems is a parking problem. You know, there's many people on that block that, you know, they probably go around for 2 hours a day trying to get parking spaces. That parking lot is very vital in that neighborhood. And I feel that if you guys are for West Ham, if you guys do care about West Ham, I feel that you guys should vote against this, regardless of whatever the conflicts, whatever is found. And, you know, like I said, the votes, we're here now, and this is gonna be, you know, hopefully I can attend the next meeting, but, you know, we'll see the actions of our board members and we'll see where you guys really stand. And if you guys are here to represent the people, or you guys are here to represent our developer and our administration. Another thing, I know that you guys said you're not answering questions. I just wanted to know any specifics on those black boxes that were put in the parking lots. I know you had talked to Frank a little bit about it, but just, you know, just wanted to put that on the record that I am asking about that.
We're trying to keep the conversation today directed just towards this property.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. And like everybody else said here, you know, this developer has been developing all over town, not just in this area. I understand if it was a different developer, somebody else wanted to bring in a new project, that's understandable, but it's just the same constant thing that's going on here. The same developer, the same people, everybody else doing the same, and I want to know there has to be something going on if they're using the same people, the same lawyer that represents everybody on the planning board. So just, if you guys do care about Western, I hope you guys do show your vote and, you know, vote against this project. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public that wishes to be recognized?
Francisco Ferrero, 5206 Burger Line, West York, New Jersey. I'll state some questions. If you guys would like to answer them, that would be great for the sake of transparency. I know this property was handed down to the town of West New York from a long life West New York family that lived there and had some mansion or something there. This was even before I came to West New York, or right about the time that I did. And this property was given, I believe, to the town of West New York when that family passed away. I would like to see a record of when the family left that property to the town and how that property became to be owned by the parking authority. Second of all, I'd like to know the same thing, how do you assess this property? There's a property down the block where Mr. Capadaglio also wanted to build, and it's smaller than this parking lot, and it was worth whatever, I don't know how many million more than this property that's bigger, whatever they're trying to sell it to him for, 2.5 million or whatever. The property, 2 million. The property is supposed to assess for a whole lot more than $2 million. Smaller property down the block it went for a lot more, and is assessed for a lot more. I know you don't want to hear the same thing, but I gotta reiterate what Linda and Patrick said. There is definitely conflict of interest with these two gentlemen. They stand to profit from this construction, so they must recuse themselves. Nardo, the conflict of interest is there. They own property in this block. They dealt with Silvio Costa. There's a circle there that their vote is, it's corrupted. There is a conflict of interest there, and I hope the attorneys on the board do the right thing in looking at that. The other thing is, I'd like to put this on the board members. If you could possibly, we've asked for this before. We go to a lot of meetings because there's a lot of things going on in our town, a lot of issues going on in our town. So we attend a lot of meetings. Unfortunately, this is one meeting we can't make because it's 8 o'clock in the morning. And we've asked before if you guys will make this meeting at a reasonable hour. Residents can't attend this meeting. They got to go to work. They can't be here 8 o'clock in the morning. All the other town meetings are at 6 p.m., 7 p.m., so residents could attend. That's the whole purpose of having these meetings open to the public, so the concerned residents could be here. And I'd like to ask this board and put it on the record, if you could change these parking authority meetings to a reasonable hour where residents of West York could attend. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. Do you have anything to say?
No, nothing.
Are there any other members of the public that wish to be recognized by the Board of Commissioners?
I forgot to mention one thing. Can I say it real quick?
You got about another minute and a half.
All right, cool. Thank you, Ronaldo. I like, before we leave from here, if possible, get some information on what's going to happen with this property, and also I'd like to know the issue that's going on with Mr. Herrera supposedly being fired or dismissed and being replaced. I'd like to know what of that can be disclosed to us, the public.
We can't discuss any personal matters. I can't even confirm that there is a personnel matter.
Okay.
Okay.
You can? So, would you like to?
No, I don't know, I was outside with you.
Okay.
Counselor, I know, okay, understood, understood, thank you.
I don't know if the board members have any questions for any members of the public or want to respond to anything. If not, we'll have Mr. Capdaglia and his guys talk to us about where we are in this deal. Counselor?
Yes, good morning. For the record, my name is Al Alonzo. I'm an attorney in North Bergen.
Do me a favor, just slide the mic over right here so we can make sure we get what you're saying out.
My firm is Alonzo Navarrete, and I represent Noralco LLC. I'm Mr. Bagley, who's present here at the meeting, as well as Henry Swed, one of his associates. We're here to answer any questions that the board may have. Now, my understanding is that we were asked to come here to discuss the status of the existing contract.
Well, I'd like to understand the status of the project. I think that's more what we're trying to understand. Where are you? What's going on?
Okay, two things happened. First and foremost, there was a request to the Board of Commissioners that the property be deemed to be an area in need of redevelopment.
Which board of commissioners?
The mayor and Board of Commissioners.
That's so we don't
Yeah,
confuse them with our
yes,
board.
yes.
Thank you.
So what happens is that a developer has no control in that process. That's just a request that's made. It's not like when you go before the planning board or a zoning board where the developer actually files an application and then we prosecute that application to conclusion. We present our witnesses, the testimony, the evidence, and then the board makes their determination. When you go in for an area in need of redevelopment, what happens is there's a request that's made and then it's up to the commissioners to consider it, which they did. They adopted a resolution referring the matter to the planning board. The planning board did hear testimony on it. Again, we were not part of that process. My understanding is that the planner hired by the planning board recommended that the criteria was met. But for whatever reason, the planning board chose not to recommend that the designation. Now, that recommendation, whether it's favorable or not, goes back to the Board of Commissioners, which is the mayor Board of Commissioners, and then they take whatever action they deem appropriate, so they can accept or reject that recommendation. So where we are now is that there was a recommendation not to declare the area in need of redevelopment that was sent back to the mayor and Board of Commissioners. The mayor and Board of Commissioners never acted on that. Instead, what happened was we, as a developer, started preparing a lot of documentation and evidence to support the planning board planners' recommendation. We hired engineers, architects, other types of consultants, and then we had contacted, at the time it was Gilberto Garcia, the town attorney, and we said we're ready to come before the Board of Commissioners to present our case to support the position that there is in need of redevelopment. There was a series of emails that went back and forth. We were actually placed on the agenda, we were off the agenda, and we were actually on and off the agenda, I would say at least 3 times, for whatever reason.
At the town meetings, the regular schedule.
Correct, so that they can consider and conclude that portion of the approval contingency, because that all falls under the approval contingency portion of the contract. And that's basically where we're at. We're ready to go before the mayor and Board of Commissioners at whatever time that they deem appropriate. We don't know why it was taken off the agenda, but it has. At the same time, legally we're allowed to have simultaneous applications before various boards for the same piece of property. And then ultimately, you can get them all approved, all denied, or some approved, some denied, and then it's up to the developer to choose whichever one they're going to proceed with. So what we did was, because we felt that it was taking longer than we wanted to take, we filed an application with the zoning board for zoning approval, which is different. And it's more difficult for us, because now we have a higher burden to prove than if there was a need of redevelopment. Not only that, but the contract provides for what's called a pilot program. The pilot program would come in with the redevelopment and not through the zoning. So we would be giving up substantial consideration by pursuing the zoning board. But in order to keep the process going forward, we're waiting to hear from the Board of Commissioners. in terms of when we can be heard and present our evidence. And so they can take whatever appropriate action is necessary. And simultaneously, we file with the zoning board. They're doing their engineering review now, and we hope to be on that agenda shortly. And basically, that's where we stand in terms of the process.
When did you file the zoning?
It was several weeks ago. I think it was about 2 weeks ago.
Hi, I'm Henry Sweat, Vice President for Capital Property Company. I'd like to just add too that this was an open public process. The West New York Parking Authority did put out an RFP.
have his address where he
Spring,
lives?
sorry, I'm speaking now. In the spring or sometime of 2012, we responded to it. We submitted our proposal. We were awarded the right to proceed, and then we signed a contract for the purchase of the property. So it was an open and public process.
And that's on file here, and you have a
Correct.
Right, to that point, I have a copy of the August 28, 2012 meetings, and part of that, the meetings, minutes, excuse me, indicates that at this time, Councilor Luciani addressed the board and informed that Morata LLC was the sole responsive bidder for the proposals requested for the sale and development of the parking lot. And so it was all.
That was a sealed bid.
We had resolutions from the West New York Parking Authority that authorized their executive director.
We're comfortable with our procedure.
Okay, so
And
I'm
we'll-
just explaining for the public that this was an open process, open and public process. The other thing I wanted to mention was, or reiterate, was that, in our contract, we did have the right to go get a tax abatement. So the process was necessary for us to go through the redevelopment process, approach the Board of Commissioners, the mayor and the council, which they proceeded in that fashion. The other thing I want to say is about the parent conflict of interest is that conflicts or apparent conflict of interest is that we do have a right to a vote here. Whether it's conflict or not.
Well, I'm not going to agree with you. We have an agreement in place. We're looking at some of the issues around the agreement. We may not need to take any action today. We haven't decided what action, if any, we're taking. So you're not entitled to something that you don't need or we might not want to give. So the question I think you're asking is that if we are comfortable with the existing agreement the way it is and the process that you're following, no action needs to be taken today. This is simply an update. However, as your council knows, there are one or two points that the board is wrestling with, and we're trying to hear from you to understand where you are in the process so that we can further evaluate what needs to be done with this parcel and with this agreement.
If I may also, counsel, while we were talking and you heard it reiterated repeatedly from the public standpoint, it was one of my interests and concerns when I took over the authority was the number of parking spaces. That lot is an existing public lot. Under your proposal, does the public lose any parking spaces there?
No. You will get back 71 spaces, covered parking spaces. Security? Yes. At no cost to you. We're going to be maintaining the lot, no snow removal, no maintenance, no lighting expenses. It's all going to be covered by Pappadagri Property Company.
Now currently there's such a procedure in place in another property?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, at our 6035 Meridian Park Avenue project.
And there's transponders that the parking tenants receive?
That's correct.
Okay, and who pays for that?
We do.
And then who pays for the maintenance and the upkeep and the replacement of those transponders?
Again, Pappadagri Property Company.
Okay, the property's insured, it's covered, it's secure, it's gated?
That's correct.
Okay, so basically there are no expenses. Currently, the parking lot as exists generates no ratables, correct? It's public entity.
The parking lot is a tax exempt property.
66th Street lot.
Correct.
66th Street.
Correct. So currently, it's tax exempt, and the parking authority, as you know, it has certain expenses to maintain and upkeep the parking lot.
That's correct.
And that comes out of their operating budget, and what would happen is then, as you're doing it now on 61st Street and Park Avenue, you basically are providing a service, and the West New York Parking Authority receives the revenue from that service, and they have no expenses and no other obligations.
Absolutely, and just going back to the 67th Street lot, I mean, the property is currently tax exempt, so when the project does get built, it now becomes rateable. And so it's the town of West New York will get taxes from it.
As the commissioners will recall, the agreement that we have, now that Capadagli has a CO or a temporary CO for 6035, we have 33 tenants in that lot that rent monthly from us, and it's been very successful so far. So is that what you're referring to, the 6035?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That agreement is with us.
At a much higher revenue too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
We're getting
it's-
$150 of parking space.
Right. So you could get the same at the 67th Street lot times 71 spaces.
All those things were discussed in our meeting before we entered into a contract. We're just trying to understand kind of where you are. Obviously, there are, as I stated with your council, we've had some correspondence back and forth, and we're trying to understand what the process is, and we're trying to understand our rights to the agreement with respect to where you are. And we're trying to understand what your intentions are currently, specifically in light of the fact that you may not get a tax abatement. So we'd like to understand, what your development plans are if you don't get a tax abatement, because that may or may not happen, and we're concerned about the timing of the deal.
Sure, I can just.
Let me just pass this
Yeah,
out.
slide it down. Just state your name and your last name.
George Capadagli, principal of Meridia Capadagli property.
Hey.
Can we put addresses for these gentlemen on the record?
Your address is their business address?
Just to clarify, because there seems to be a little bit more answer to the question. I've been in this town for over 10 years under various administrations. We built a bunch of two-families up on Polk Street when we started. I own a 318 54th Street. We own a building there right next to the school that one of my daughters lives in. My other daughter lives in the building that we're in. It's not a place that we're just casual visitors to. It's a place that my family lives. I have five children, 4 grandchildren, the 5th one coming. So this is very serious to us. I don't really like my name and the smudging because I've been in this business since 1970, and I have never had anything misconstrued. It's not me. I'm very transparent. That being said, we made a deal, which the parking authority made a deal that they were going to get, because we have no control over it, to get this tax abatement, which took forever. It's a process we have absolutely no control over. But we sat and we waited, and waited, and waited, and waited. It's nothing that your board even had control over. Out of other frustration, we decided, well, we were ready. We could have filed these plans a month after we signed the contract, as we did immediately, once we knew this was an effort in futility with this. And we're hoping that it gets done. But to answer your question succinctly is that we are prepared, we believe enough in this town, without the pilot, the long-term tax abatement, we are prepared to go forward with this project. And we are there now. The plans are filed. We should be heard in the next 2 or 3 months. You're looking at a number also, just for the public. You're saying, well, he paid $2 million. That's not what it paid. I also paid for 70 parking spaces that are worth anywhere from $30,000 to $40,000 a space, which you're going to get, which is another $2.5 to $3 million. when you add that to the value of what you're getting, the city is gonna get an asset that's probably gonna generate 500,000 to 600,000. Whether or not it's congested or whatever, that's another whole issue. But the value, the merits of the business thing are just simple. Whether or not the congestion is good, whether or not West New York wants to go in that direction, that's the Board of Adjustment's call. But, I mean, as far as, as far as, you know, just saying whether or not it was an insider deal or something, I can't even, it's true, this is just a good deal for everybody, whether or not it gets approved or not. You know, and then, you know, there are not many people that are willing to invest this kind of money off of the river. I'm gonna tell you that. We're willing to put our whole family's fortune up here into this one. I'm just saying, me.
So what I'm asking is a more narrow question. Currently, the agreement between the Parking Authority and Capitaglia talks about a pilot being part of the business deal, and the Parking Authority working with the developer to secure permits and approvals that you may need to get the deal done. It talks about us being in a public-private partnership for this deal. For reasons beyond your control and beyond the agency's control, the board and the planning board and the board of commissioners and the mayor have decided not to grant that pilot. The question I'm asking is that, and this is what our board is concerned with, the Parking Authority board, is what is the intention of Capitaglia absent a tax abatement?
We're prepared to go forward.
Was there a reason why you hadn't gone forward in the last couple of years with?
We were waiting, Mr. Chairman. We were told that there was gonna be a redevelopment. You know, according to the contract, it was supposed to be to get a tax abatement, and the tax abatement, the long-term tax abatement, you needed to be in redevelopment. To do that, they needed to get a process in order that just took an inordinate amount of time. I mean, I gotta say, and I hate to use the word, we were the victims of certain, I mean, we were just sitting and waiting. I mean, we do 800 to 1,000 apartments a year we build. We own a lot of real estate. I mean, my daughters love Western New York. They'll stay here forever, and the other girls coming over from New York now. But I mean, so we would have been at the board, the minute we saw that the plans were ready. We were ready to go. We just been sitting and waiting. I mean, we had no control over that process. So.
Does the new master plan come into play at all for this project?
I guess, I don't know. It's way above my pay grade, I tell you the truth. I would think it should have some control over it, some control, but I mean, I don't know what it does. I mean,
So at this point, without a master plan in place and without any tax abatements in place, you're still prepared to go forward?
That's it.
Well, who wouldn't? It's a $20 million property.
Frank, please don't respond. Commissioners, do you have any other questions for Mr. Capitaglia or his team?
Who are you working with in getting this process through?
Alonzo's our attorney.
Right.
Henry can tell you better who the professionals, but we have
CPA Architecture,
Pat McClellan.
MCB Engineering is ours.
How much has been spent today?
A couple of $100,000.
And the plans have been filed. I mean, they're complete.
When were they filed?
About 2 weeks ago, Mr. Chairman.
Any other filings prior to it?
Just stuff that went to the board, Nick.
Right, just,
I don't know.
yeah, just in connection with the rezoning. And now, like I said, we were waiting for the mayor and board of commissioners to act on to finalize the rezoning process, one way or the other. And we're waiting for the zoning board to do their reviews and to place us on the agenda.
How many parking spaces in total are going to be on the project?
I'm going to defer to Henry.
Roughly. We know that 70 at least.
Almost 400. Over. Is it over 400?
Well, there's at least 5 levels of parking. So,
It's excess of what we need. What we need physically, there's more parking than what we need.
Are you gonna make those spaces available for
They're
public
the
parking?
old plans, Richie, I don't think
Oh, no
they're.
good? Okay.
Aside
they're the
from
ones that
park
are-
spaces?
We make them, we make an overage, a public, private, like we did on Park
Okay,
Avenue.
yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is it gonna be available for the area residents to park if you have,
All
I
the
don't know what the
people,
ratio is right now of, spaces per unit. I'm assuming it's 1-to-1 at least, or a 1-to-1 bedroom, but, if you do have an overage, are you gonna make it available for residents to be able to park if they
It certainly
if they
makes
choose
sense
to?
to us, and it's a financial
Yeah.
benefit for us.
Yeah, I had an application a number of years ago on Park Avenue, across from the Overlook Terrace, and we had an excess number of parking spaces. And we had, as a condition of the approval, was a certain number of parking spaces were going to be allocated to the parking authority,
Right.
that they could do whatever they want to do with that.
Right,
A certain number were allocated to the residents in the building,
right.
and then the excess were to be made available to the public at large. So any of the neighbors in the neighborhood who wanted just for short-term parking, they could just use them. So I'm assuming that that's something that would happen here, because it makes no sense to have vacant parking spaces. It doesn't help us and it doesn't help the residents.
You have any questions?
You had mentioned the plans might have changed, George. Aesthetically, has that changed from the first plan that we got?
I would believe so, but Henry can get you the new plans.
And the number of units has changed, and the number of
I think
parking?
it went down, we reduced it six, I think you have 280, went down to 200.
Units?
Yeah, it reduced. And we're also waiting, just as an aside, for this master plan. We thought that would give direction. There's a lot of things in flux in the town, and we're just sitting on the sidelines waiting for those things to clarify and.
Or the FBI to come in. I have a few more questions if I'm allowed to speak again.
If the chairman allows you, you can, but right now the public portion is closed.
Keep going forward.
I can ask some question, Mr. Chairman.
We're here asking questions now, we're trying to.
All right. And I'll make a quick statement to you, man. You're a serious attorney. I look into how this vote was taken. I see illegalities that already occurred. Illegalities in which these gentlemen voted on the sale of this property.
But hold on, Frank, you're talking out of line, and you're talking factually incorrect. Many of these board members, including Henry and Armando, were not here.
Correct.
And did not vote on the application. So your alleged impropriety, and even if your conflict exists, which I haven't had the opportunity to investigate whether it does or not, those individuals did not vote on this contract. So you're speaking out of turn, and you're factually incorrect. So please, if you have questions, you can write to us, you can send me an email, we will give you whatever public information is available, so you can be factually correct, so the allegations actually are substantive.
I'll operate.
8 o'clock in the morning. You don't want nobody to talk.
Commissioners, do we have any more questions?
What's that question? If you can continue the plan without tax abatement, if the master plan comes along, what happens then?
I don't know. I don't know. He might, I guess, if the master plan is amended and allows it to be there and need a redevelopment, there's a sequence for obtaining a tax abatement. The site plan actually is a prerequisite for obtaining tax abatement, so it's not like the sequence is out of sequence. It's not like you have to do, he would actually necessarily need to do this part before he applied for a tax abatement anyway. So I don't know that would impact our sequence. I think that for us, because of the timeline and extended timeline, I think, we need to talk about some litigation options, and we need to talk about whether, I think we need to understand now, so what I think I need to understand to better advise you is I need a letter from them explaining to them what they propose their timeline to be to finish the project, to complete the project, to fund our buyout. So, I think that's kind of where we are, so I think if we can get that information, then we can have some further discussion about what our options are and that would impact my advice to you.
Would that also include an appraisal like we talked about?
Well, we've already authorized that, so
Okay.
I don't know whether Chairman asked that earlier. I said that we had not had a lot of conversation the last couple of weeks, so I don't know if we've done that. I know we authorized it the last meeting. So I think that for me, counsel, I'd like to get a letter from you and your client advising us as to what the timeline is that you are proposing going forward to get your approvals and to get the building built and meet our contractual time frame. So we say, when you get CO, like tell us when you think you're going to get CO. We're trying to figure out, what our cash flow will be, and we're trying to understand that. So if you could let us know in a letter so that I can appraise the board, not appraise, I can apprise the board of what we're trying to figure out, and then we'll get back to you.
Very good. You include construction timeline, right?
Yeah, the whole thing.
Okay.
Yes.
The contractual benchmarks have all those items in it, so if he can just say, hey, here's what we think we can do as far as a timeline, I think that we can start to have a more intelligent conversation, because to be quite honest, we didn't know if you guys until today, if you were even going to build it without a pipeline. I don't have any more questions today.
Anything else you want to add, Mr. Copeland?
Thank you for the opportunity
The
to
only-
make our case.
The only thing I would say is that what I'd like to do, if possible, is to, I recommend that we carry the matter to the next meeting, so that we can, if you can provide that correspondence to us in the interim. I don't know when our next meeting is, Rich. When's our next meeting?
Third Wednesday, I'm sorry, third Monday, I think.
April 15th.
Third Tuesday.
So our next meeting is April 15th, so if you can get that letter to me by, the end of the week or early next week, so we can get it out to our commissioners, appreciate that.
Yeah, well,
I don't have more questions, guys.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we need a motion to carry.
I'd like to make a motion to carry.
Second.
All those voting in favor of motion to carry the current project related to the contract at 66th Street and Park Avenue? Aye. None opposed, motion carries. Is there any other new business?
Thank you, have a good day.
Thank you.
Is there any other new business before the Board of Commissioners of the West New York Parking Authority? Councilors, anything else we have?
Just from listening to the public today, I think it might make some sense to put together a fact sheet on the project. Yeah, I think that would make some sense, so that, we could hand out when the project was entered into, what the contract is, who will want it, just to put together a packet. Maybe administration could work with Jody just to make that available to people.
We'll put it up on our website as well.
Yeah, that makes sense, just to put it up on the website, so that everybody can take a look at it.
So we all have the right facts.
So everybody's on the same page.
Makes sense.
Are we gonna get any answers to some of the questions that the public posed here today?
If you put them in
writing.
Oprah them?
Yeah,
Got
sure,
it.
we'll get
All
it
right.
to you right away, absolutely.
Post them
You
also.
just heard firsthand that I don't have a current plan as for this property, so as soon as I get one, if that's part of your request, I'll get it over to you. That's not a problem.
I think the fact sheet's gonna answer a lot of these
Yeah.
questions too.
I think it'll answer a lot of the process questions
Right.
and the timing questions, and I think that folks can get through that.
We know the facts.
I think that we'll narrow it down to what the issue really is.
Is there anything else under new business before the Board of Commissioners? I didn't hear none. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second, all those in favor?